welcome to this explainer. We're diving straight into a massive paradigm shift in AI today, and it is actively breaking everything we thought we knew about how to interact with these systems. Look, if you've spent the last couple of years mastering the art of prompt engineering, tweaking your inputs just right to get that perfect output, well, I've got some news for you. That era, it's pretty much already over. We are moving incredibly fast from a world where humans prompt machines to a world where AI systems are actually prompting themselves.
Let's dive right into this pretty jarring quote from the very person building Anthropic's code tool. He said, "I don't prompt Claude anymore. I have loops running that prompt Claude and figure out what to do. My job is to write loops." Think about the gravity of that statement for a second. The individual responsible for engineering one of the most advanced, widely used coding assistants on the market doesn't even use the tool the way you and I do. He has entirely stopped typing prompts. Instead, his whole job is shifted to building architecture, these loops that run in the background, figure out what to do, and completely remove him from the actual conversation with the AI. And just to prove this isn't hyperbole, by May 2026, a staggering 80% of the code merged into Anthropic's own codebase was authored autonomously by Claude. That is up from low single digits just a year prior. When Claude Code first launched, human engineers were still writing the vast bulk of the underlying logic. But this adoption curve, it went completely vertical. AI is now fundamentally building AI. It's not just a cool metaphor, it is literally happening right before our eyes, transitioning from a helpful assistant into an autonomous workforce.
So let's look at the evidence illustrating how fast this shift is scaling across the entire software development ecosystem.
Right now, Claude Code already accounts for about 4% of all GitHub commits globally. Now, 4% might sound small at first glance, but that is a massive volume of code for a single tool. But here's the crazy part. Take a look at that projected growth. Projections suggest that figure is going to cross 20% by the end of 2026. Literally 1 in 5 lines of code pushed to the world's largest software repository is expected to be written entirely by this AI system. The speed at which this is displacing traditional human keystrokes is just unprecedented.
This brings us to a crucial point, understanding exactly where you currently stand in this rapid evolution. Let's walk through the maturity model of AI coding.
A lot of people think they're at the absolute cutting edge right now because they've mastered stage 2, prompting. But honestly, you're already behind. The actual frontier has moved on to stage 3, which is building autonomous looping systems. Let's break this down really quickly. In stage 1, AI was basically just a glorified autocomplete. You wrote the code and the AI suggested the next few words. In stage 2, which is where most of the tech world sits today, you describe the feature you want, the AI writes the function, and then you review it. You give feedback. But stage 3 is the real breakthrough. This is where you build a system that prompts the AI automatically, evaluates its own output, and decides its next move without ever waiting for you to hit the enter key.
Now, what's really fascinating about this comparison is the direct contrast. In stage 2, you are still the orchestrator. You are the bottleneck. Even if you're running 5 or 10 instances of Claude in parallel, every single decision, every review, and every little iteration still has to flow through your brain. You are the rate limiter. On the flip side, the autonomous system in stage 3 removes you from the equation completely. The AI generates the work, checks it against your predefined rules, realizes it made a mistake, rewrites the prompt itself, and tries again.
So how exactly does this build? Let's take a look at the anatomy of an autonomous AI loop under the hood. Instead of furiously typing prompts all day, your new job is basically to define the success criteria. The loop continuously evaluates and reprompts Claude until it hits that exact bar. You're acting as the architect now. You give the system a really clear goal, you establish a strict rubric of what an excellent result looks like, and you clearly define exactly what a failure looks like. Once you hit go, Claude gets the task, it does the work, and the loop automatically checks that work against your rubric. If the output fails, the system automatically writes a brand new prompt detailing what went wrong and sends it right back to Claude. Zero human intervention. This autonomous workflow is so insanely powerful that Anthropic's head of product actually uninstalled his IDE completely. Just let that sink in for a second. An IDE, the fundamental, absolutely essential workstation software for a developer, deleted. Why? Because over a single month, Claude independently wrote 259 pull requests. That level of output is physically impossible for a single human being to achieve by manually typing, but by architecting loops instead of writing prompts, the system was able to generate, review, and push all of that completely on its own. What you should really take away from this is how these loops apply outside of just software engineering, acting almost like a real-life Jarvis for any industry.
This is definitely not just about code anymore. It's about automating any data-heavy workflow. Take an influencer, for example. They could set up a daily loop that wakes up, reads every single Instagram comment, evaluates the sentiment, and builds a gorgeous dashboard of top requests before they even get out of bed in the morning. Or think about a product manager. They could have a system running overnight that reads through hundreds of company Slack channels, grades the urgency of feature requests using a specific rubric, and delivers a perfectly formatted brief every single morning. You are essentially building customized AI agents that do the heavy lifting while you sleep.
Finally, let's zoom out to the macro level, because this transition to loops fundamentally alters the future business landscape for investors and business owners alike. There are 4 critical takeaways we need to look at here. First, let's start with Anthropic's explosive growth from a $10 billion to a $47 billion run rate in under a year. This massive hypergrowth is pulling them way ahead of competitors, and it's being driven specifically by this loop capability. But that growth comes with massive secondary effects for the rest of the market. It fundamentally changes how creators and businesses work, leading to looming shifts in engineering headcounts, sparking the creation of entirely new infrastructure layers, and just massively accelerating development timelines across the board. Which means we have to ask the really hard question about headcount. As these systems enable single developers to ship up to 49 pull requests a day, the reliance on massive engineering teams is very likely going to shrink. While headcount hasn't drastically changed everywhere quite yet, think about the basic math here. If one developer, armed with a perfectly architected autonomous loop, can suddenly outproduce a team of 10 traditional prompt engineers, what happens to the size of typical software companies over the next 24 months? The gap between the top 1% of developers who use systems and everyone else who still manually prompts is just going to widen dramatically.
However, this also creates an incredibly lucrative gap in the market for a brand new AI infrastructure layer, because when AI starts prompting AI at scale, you suddenly need entirely new ways to monitor, evaluate, and manage those workflows. And honestly, this category doesn't even exist in a mature form yet. Over the last 2 years, we saw a massive boom in prompt engineering consultants. Well, over the next 2 years, the massive businesses are going to be built by the people who know how to set up, monitor, and maintain these autonomous loop systems for other companies. It is absolutely the next big business opportunity.
And because development speed is no longer gated by how fast a human can type, long-term corporate timelines are being completely slashed. Every timeline we currently rely on is being upended in real time. Because these AI systems don't need to sleep, and because they can continuously test and refine their own outputs through these loops, products that businesses assumed would take until 2030 to reach the market, they're suddenly just a year or 2 away from launch. It's pulling the future right into the present.
So to wrap up this explainer, the absolutely essential skill for the next 2 years is system architecture. We want to leave you with this big question to consider. Are you still stuck in stage 2, or are you ready to build loops? The future definitely belongs to the architects, not the prompters. It is time to start looking at your daily workflows, your data, and your code, and asking how you can build a self-evaluating system that does all that heavy lifting for you. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I highly recommend you start exploring